Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Calder's Calling podcast, AHL News Now's flagship podcast and your premier destination for everything surrounding the American Hockey League. I'm Corey Swartz, and today I am joined by Deana Weinheimer and Zander Manning. Before we kick things off, just want to remind you guys you can find us wherever you get your podcasts and also on YouTube. So feel free to like and subscribe so you can get every episode straight into your feed every week when we have the show. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our show sponsor, Document Doctors. While not on the ice, they can help you and your business optimize and increase your revenue and profits to a bigger slice. Check out documentdoctorsllc.com and don't forget to mention that AHL News Now sent you. So we'll quickly pivot here to our quick hits, just like a check along the boards. We're going to go around and give you some of our highlights of the American Hockey League in the week that was. And I believe we'll start with Zander, who's covering the biggest news, possibly of the American Hockey League we've had in a very long time.
Well, this week we had a coaching change in Hartford of all places, too. Kris Knoblauch is now the head coach of the Edmonton Oilers, and Steve Smith, yes, the Steve Smith that led in the 1986 own goal, unfortunately, that Steve Smith, is now the head coach of the Hartford Wolfpack. Great for Steve. Good for Kris for moving up to the NHL. In his time with the Wolfpack, Kris had a record of 119, 90, 18, and 14. Smith played in the NHL himself with Edmonton, Chicago, and Calgary, while behind the bench he was an assistant coach under Knoblauch since 2021. Was also an assistant in the NHL in Buffalo, Carolina, Edmonton, and Calgary. Fun fact for Knoblauch as well, this is the second time that he's coaching Connor McDavid, as he also coached him in Erie before he got drafted by the Oilers. Speaking of Hartford, stick taps going out to their head equipment manager, Craig Lewis, who celebrated his 1,000th game this past Saturday.
Taking a trip down towards my neck of the woods in Hershey, we had a milestone alert. Logan Day tallied his 100th professional point on Saturday night on Pierre Dubé's goal. He had, I believe, the primary assist on the goal, but it is his 100th point at the professional level, the American Hockey League level. He did so against his former team, the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, en route to a 2-0 Hershey win on this particular evening.
And pivoting from the Atlantic Division, we're going to take a quick trip over to the North Division, my home base. And here is this week's North Division quick scouting tip for you. Do not go on the penalty kill against the Syracuse Crunch. Whatever you do, just don't do it. The division leaders in the North... Let me try that again. I'm so sorry.
Oh, you started out so good.
I know. The North Division leading Crunch also lead the league with 5 short-handed goals. Also, another quick tip for you, defend against rookie left winger Maxim Groshev. He has 5 goals in his last 2 games, including a hat trick on Tuesday's school day game in Bridgeport against the Islanders. And just a little fun thing that happened in that game. There were a couple players that decided to have a fight. I don't remember what led up to it. Definitely one of those kind of huggy type fights, not the ones we're kind of used to and the ones that really get the fans going. But while they are hugging it out, should I say, the DJ decided to chime in with Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You, which, I don't know, it made me laugh while I was sitting at my desk at work watching that the other day. So kudos to the DJ. I guess when we get to our 3 stars of the week, that's going to be my honorable mention.
School day games are a maximum amount of fun you can't find many other places. But taking a spin over to Chicago forward Chris Terry tallied his 700th AHL point. He's only the 26th player in American Hockey League history to reach this milestone. That happened on Sunday evening, a 5-0 win over the Rockford Ice Hogs, who, speaking of which, both of Chicago's wins this season have come against the Ice Hogs. Their first win was a 5-2 decision way back on October 21st, and the latest was, of course, on Sunday Rockford's power play came up empty in 8 tries, yet they still lead the league with a 29.7% efficiency rating. Clearly just wasn't their night on Sunday. But the good news is they won't have to worry too much. They play each other 10 more times this season, which is about as much AHL as I think that I've ever heard in my life. So look forward to plenty more interesting matchups. Kind of an empty time. I was just thinking about this with the Bears as well. A lot of teams have started off really hot in the power play, but are now starting to hit those early season struggles you don't always see until, you kind of get like a month, maybe a little bit more into each season where, recalls and other things happen. Obviously, that doesn't affect Chicago, but, some teams have certainly felt it worse than others.
And then just one more quick hit. We're going to take it out west. And honestly, this was hard for me to believe that it took this long, but we finally have every team in the league has won their first road victory. The last one standing, and not in a good way, were the Colorado Eagles. They won their first road game 5-2 against the San Diego Gulls. Justus Onanen saving 28 of 30 shots in the game. That is now points in 6 straight for the club. But a month in and just now getting their first road win, I don't know. That hurts a little bit.
It does. It does. Absolutely. But hey, points in 6 straight, not too bad, not too shabby. But moving on here, we're going to move on to our 3 stars of the week before we get into our regular segments and introduce our special guest. We will segue right into our 3 stars of the week. And I'll get us started. Guys, I don't normally we usually can kind of do some unorthodox 3 stars, right? I usually like to try to bring some kind of statistical prowess or something really interesting here, but I didn't quite find anything that tickled my fancy in the usual way. So I kind of went off the wall with this one. I have to give my 3 stars to Garrett Rowe of the Hershey Bears. And again, I promise it won't be Corey's Hershey Bear of the Week on my 3 stars. It will be somebody else, but this was one I got to see this one, front and center on Sunday. I have to give it to Hershey Bears forward Garrett Rowe because Sunday was the team's Hockey Fights cancer night. And, although the game was one to forget, I am willing to throw the entire game out the window because of Garrett Rowe. He had this fantastic and touching, a little 5-minute segment they played where he was talking about his mom who, unfortunately passed away as a result of cancer, not too long ago. And the segment was fantastic. And, when they cut back, you kind of realize he's on the ice about to take a face off for the next shift when that segment finished. And it was one of those ones, it was a very powerful segment. I mean, the lineup for the Bears was great. You had Ivan Miroshnichenko, who scored a goal. He had battled and beaten Hodgkin's lymphoma, another form of cancer, prior to turning pro. And, so that was a great moment. But for me, it was Garrett Rowe. I loved what he did. And, it took a lot. I would encourage everybody listening to go watch the segment on the Bears Twitter page. And I believe it's on their Facebook and Instagram pages as well. It was just a very touching segment. And, it's one of those things you truly don't see the depth that it affects a lot of people to until you hear those stories, right? Like we've all know somebody that's been affected by cancer, families, personal, otherwise, it's everybody. And it's not until you see that you really, get another bit of perspective on it. So I have to give it to Garrett Rowe. His number 65 is a tribute to his mom, whose birthday was June 5th. So 6'5" is his number. So I loved that. And he's my star of the week.
And Corey, you bring up a good point about sometimes our 3 stars have to be a little bit more fun. I mean, this is just kind of, I guess the whole point behind this segment is it's whatever stood out to us. So I guess sometimes these are our 4 stars whenever Jay's here. Unfortunately, he is out sick this week. Jay, hope you get feeling better soon, my friend. But for this, it's not always going to be a player. And for my top star this week, it is not a player. But we are going to go to the Charlotte Checkers, and I'm going to present this video. If you are on YouTube, posted by the Charlotte Checkers on X, Twitter, whatever we're calling it today. And I want you to watch head equipment manager Chris Fournier. So just watch this. clutch with the stick. Here comes the player. And now they're coming in. He just coasts right on in with his brand new stick and score. Now, of course, look at the players. They turn around, give Fournier all of the fist bumps, all that. It is just puts them up 5-3 in the third. That really helped solidify that win. But just fantastic job managing the equipment, managing the flow of the game. They don't get enough respect, in my opinion. Like,
Not only that, but
that was clutch.
They don't get enough credit either. They don't get enough credit
For
for
sure.
everything they do. Even there's some guys who just play without a stick and suck it up, but then there's the ones who know that their equipment manager can step it up for them when they need it the most, and clearly he did that.
I always find it fascinating if you get a chance to go to a hockey game, especially pro games, and sit down low, and you'll see them there, with their fingers on it, and they're constantly like looking at who's on the ice, and you see their fingers adjusted that way. They have a finger on the sticks of whoever is around the puck or has the puck at that time. So that way, if something happens, they immediately just have to close in on it and they can go. It's not look around, oh, where is Trey Fix-Wolanski's stick? I got to find it. They're always ready. And I cannot imagine having that amount of detail for that long, that many nights out of the year. And I guess also I'm going to give a secondary shout out to whoever was running that bench cam and caught that. Just great job all around. Top star going to the equipment manager out in Charlotte this week.
Now, for my star, I am going to pick a player. I did pick a player this week. I went with Levi Merilainen. Not just because of his name. Yes, I love his name. I am a sucker for wonderful goalie names, but no, that is not the reason why. He's not a rookie this year, but he might as well be. He's only played 7 games in his professional career. And this year, he has not lost in regulation once. But he has overtime victories in his last 2 starts and a combined 64 saves in both. And had an 0.99 save percentage in last week's game where he had 37. And to me, that just screams impressive. When he's played 3 games, his counterpart, Matt Sogard, another great name, mind you, has played 8 games. So he might play once a week. But when you play once a week and you still don't lose in regulation and you can take it the distance and make the other team work for it in your second year in the league, that says a lot to me and really shows me how much of an anchor to a team he can be.
And it's not like the North is a easy division. The North is so difficult this season. There's been some where it's been extremely top heavy. This has been a really almost anything goes in the North, except if you're Laval. But that's a whole other discussion. But man, for a young goaltender, I'm honestly shocked more people aren't talking about him.
I'm shocked not a lot of people are talking about Belleville, period, with their 2 very good goalies. Maybe it's just this very top heaviness of the division. I don't know what it is. And like you mentioned, Laval is usually at the top, and it just hasn't worked out for them this year. But they have a very good goaltender duo in Belleville.
They just need to get they just need to get the goal scorers going, because what's hurting them is the goal differential. Honestly, they're still it's way too early to be talking about playoffs, but technically they are still in that last playoff spot. They're not that far behind 4th place Cleveland, but in the North right now, literally you can win or lose one game and go from 1st to 4th to 5th. It's that tight right now with the top 3 teams having a 6-6-7. But once Belleville gets their goal scorers going again, the sky's the limit with if those goalies can stay performing like that. That is the key thing. And I think this episode should just be called the goalie show, because we're going to be talking about goalies a lot in this episode.
I mean, Corey, you and I can attest to that with the Atlantic usually being like that, very top heavy.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. But so you can usually, point your finger at any team and say, hey, they have this goalie. He's really good. They have, every team's backbone is their goaltender. I mean, you look at, almost any team in the Atlantic. I mean, it's been that way for a number of years where so many of the goaltenders of the future, the Rangers, the Flyers, the Capitals, all their goaltenders have come through the AHL at different points. We saw Sam Erson's kind of gotten the promotion to Philadelphia for now, while their situation's a little hokey here. We saw Hunter Shepard, play for the Capitals over the weekend. There's so many different examples you can point to, and that's what makes the AHL so great, is that we get to see all these goaltenders kind of leave their mark in the AHL on their way to greater things.
And can we talk real quick? Why in the world has the Bakersfield Condors only played 8 games so far? I know I'm just looking at all. I'm looking at the standings right now, and it's like, oh, Colorado has played 14, Abbotsford 13, Rochester 12, Springfield's played 14, and then you have Bakersfield with 8.
Wait, and nobody's even come close to them either.
It's just 8 games. They haven't hit double digits yet, and we're basically a month into the season. I just want to talk to the schedulers.
Pacific Division, man, I tell you what, it's different out there.
Very.
And here I thought Milwaukee got screwed over by playing 4 games in the first 3 weeks.
It's going to catch up to them sometime.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very interesting at the end of the season when they have 3 or 4 more games to play and everybody else is done.
I'm just going to be curious to watch as this goes forward to see how long they're that far behind everybody else and when do they start to catch up.
They've got to have a week where they play like 5 games in 4 days or something like that.
Oh, that's going to be rough. I hope they're at home.
That's a bit of an exaggeration, but still.
They kind of do that in the Pacific, though, where you'll have these like really long stretches of like numerous games on the road, and then they'll have multiples at home type of thing. I wouldn't be surprised if it does catch up in pretty rapid fashion with something like that too. Honestly,
like a Monday, Wednesday, 3-3.
Ooh, that'd be brutal. Like Deana said, anything if it's probably going to be brutal if it catches up, fairly instantaneously type of thing. So we'll see.
There's got to be somebody that has like a long stretch off, though, in order for that to happen.
So it looks like it's really going to start to catch up to them in January. Like their schedule, October, November's light, December's looking a little bit more normal. And then once they get into January, it's starting the 16th, 2 games, off 2 days, 2 games, off 2 days, a game, off a game, back to back. And then it starts to get like that in mid-February, and then March is just brutal for them. It's it's all going to come later in the season, so hopefully it all goes well for them. We'll see.
And if they play well, they may lose some players to Knoblauch in Edmonton, but who knows?
That's
a fair point.
Whole other discussion. Poor Jack Campbell. That's a whole nother discussion.
Well, I guess we'll take a little pause here before we move into our segment section, that we will share just a little bit more about our sponsor, Document Doctors. Is your business growing beyond the 4 walls of your office? As businesses grow, so do the challenges of keeping people trained, safe, and supportive. Document Doctors, a proud sponsor of the Calder's Calling podcast and AHL News Now, offers affordable solutions to help optimize your business and keep the good times rolling. They offer content-focused solutions such as training, document creation, back office process optimization, policy and procedure development, and much more. Support the podcast and AHL News Now by visiting them at Document Doctors LLC. And don't forget to mention us when talking to their team of contentologists. Shop and support small businesses today. And Deana, I will tee you off for your segment here. I believe you're going to be talking about the masked men here this time around.
Yes, it's no secret that I have a soft spot for goaltenders, and I could talk about goaltenders all day, every day. But when looking back in the last week, no one stole the show like the goaltenders in the American Hockey League. So, I mean, honestly, goalies are feeling it this season. We've already talked a little bit about how well they've been facing that goaltending duo up in Belleville. But Saturday, if you didn't already hear about this, 6 goaltenders recorded shutouts on Saturday. So let me run this down here real quick. For the Providence Bruins, Michael DiPietro, 34 saves. Iowa's Jesper Wallstedt, 24 saves. In Utica, Isaac Poulter, 23 saves. For the Abbey Canucks, Artur Silovs, 20 saves. Toronto's Dennis Hiddleby. If you watched last week's episode, you know that I shouted him out there, but 23 saves. And this stat coming to us courtesy of @MarkUKLeaf on X, Twitter. That was the second shutout in as many games for the young goaltender out of Toronto. The last Marlies goalie to post consecutive shutouts was Garrett Sparks back in the 2017-2018 season. And then finally, for Hershey, Clay Stevenson, 24 saves. Now, again, all those happened at some point on Saturday. I can't find any AHL records regarding this, but if this were the NHL, and I looked over many sources, so I hope this is right, but it would supposedly tie the record for the most shutouts in a single day. This happened twice in the National Hockey League on March 21st, 2001, and February 28th, 1929. Included in that 2001 group were Arturs Urbe, Martin Brodeur, Hall of Famer, and Ed Belfour, also, I believe, a Hall of Famers. So I'm shocked that the American Hockey League doesn't keep a stat like that. I poured over their record book last night and today. Couldn't find anything close to it, but it has to be some sort of record, I imagine. So good job, goaltenders. Keep up the great work, the great saves, and yeah, it's a great week to be a goalie in the AHL.
Definitely one thing that blows my mind about that is pretty much all of them are at least pushing the starter button on their teams. But Michael DiPietro was not projected to be a starter this year for Providence. Providence was looking at their team and saying, all right, Brandon Bussey's going to be our starter this year. And Michael DiPietro is lucky to be on the roster, if not in the ECHL. But what does he do? He comes out and pitches a shutout this weekend. Proved all of us wrong.
And honestly, that's what coaches want. They want you to make them make those hard decisions in terms of, well, you weren't slated to stay on our roster. Make us make a spot for you.
And
so it's the best of both worlds.
Especially with Ryan Mougenol in Providence. He loves those guys that push you to the point of saying, all right, fine, we'll let you start the next game. Or, okay, I guess I was wrong about you, kid.
I mean, and not only that, I saw so many games over the past week too that the goalies were vying for a shutout, but in the last few minutes, that one goal sneaks in. Or I know, I forget if it was Jack Greaves or Pavel Chayon up in Cleveland had a game in Belleville, and I believe it was the Belleville game, and they got so close, and then Belleville mounted this huge comeback and almost took the game. It's like, oh, we go from almost a shutout to everything collapsing in on itself. So, yeah, well, that's just Cleveland hockey. That's another discussion. But yeah, goaltenders all over the league doing the thing.
That's a lot of bagels and a lot of goose eggs. So it's all the terms we love to use in hockey, and you can only hope that nobody got jinxed along the process to allow those goals. Like you said, when it happens in there, it always feels like it's a commentator's curse where you start to think about it, you start to maybe mention it. And speaking of commentators, that segues perfectly into my segment, where we introduce our special guest, Zack Fisch. Our guest today is in the midst of his 8th season behind the microphone as the voice of the Hershey Bears. He won the 2021 Ken McKenzie Award given to the AHL executive who most successfully promotes their team and called the Bears' 2023 Calder Cup win. Please give a warm welcome to Zack Fisch.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. A good introduction, Corey. Well done.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us, Zack. Really appreciate it.
Hey, it's awesome to be back on the show. Thank you for having me again. The Bears are off to a good start, and it will never get old here in 2023 Calder Cup champions. We had a real special group that I felt, blessed to be the soundtrack of the moments that they had together. So memories that'll last a lifetime. So cool to come on the show after everything that's transpired in the last half calendar year here, and looking forward to chatting with you guys.
I guess let's kind of start off with how you started doing play-by-play, because I'm always so interested in how people people get involved in jobs that with hockey that are not. You know what? I'm going to start that again. Sorry, Deana.
No problem. Go ahead.
3, 2, 1. I guess let's kind of start off with how you got involved doing play-by-play, because I'm always so interested to know how people get their start doing something for this sport that's not like the typical job, that's not, playing or coaching or GMing. So like, how did you get started in play-by-play? When did you realize that was something that you kind of wanted to do as a career?
Yeah, pretty early for me, probably when everyone else hit their growth spurt at 10, 11, 12 years old, and I didn't. And everyone else got good at hockey, and I stayed about the same and realized that playing in the NHL wasn't going to be a dream for me that was going to be achieved, but I want to be around the game. I like to talk. And for whatever reason, the broadcasting always appealed to me. So as a kid, I'd turn down the volume on NHL 98, 99, 2000, whatever it was, and call the game to a tape recorder, or turn down my TV and do the same. So I was lucky enough when I was in high school to go to a high school that was in my district, but different from the one geographically that I was supposed to go to, because they had these things called 21st century programs at my schools. And so I went to the Northwest High School where they had an e-communications program, and we got to do our own broadcast television show there, where we had a sports report weekly and would film the game on the sidelines with, for some of the first HD cameras out there, and was really lucky to be involved in that. But I always wanted to do play-by-play, and I always wanted to do something for hockey. And I grew up in Kansas City, and while there is an ECHL team there now, really wasn't much hockey there at the time as far as the pro ranks, and especially for colleges. So I wound up going to St. Cloud State University, which is where it really all started on my play-by-play journey. I knew they had a D1 hockey team. I knew they had a television station that broadcast all the games and a radio station that broadcast all the games. So I was able to go in as a freshman, 18 years old, get my hands dirty, and by a couple weeks into that year, I was the women's hockey play-by-play broadcaster for Division I women's hockey team, and that was amazing. And then opportunities started to come about with our men's team on a fill-in basis, and by my sophomore year, I was one of the full-time men's broadcasters for radio as well. Did that for 4 years there. 1 year, I was the TV broadcaster for their feed that went out to the Twin Cities even. So got my hands real dirty and got great experience. Called hockey for a junior hockey team there, the Granite City Lumberjacks. Fox Sports Prep Zone hired me to do some high school hockey for their online streams. So I got really lucky to get all these awesome opportunities and do some baseball as well. And then I knew I wanted to get into the play-by-play as a career. My degree was in television production. I learned all the behind the scenes, the camera, behind the scenes of a TV production truck, but I knew I wanted to do the play-by-play the first time I hopped on the mic. So I was lucky to do 4 years of great Division I hockey. And then that led me to the USHL to start my career in Dubuque, which of course, through many turns, wound up in Hershey. But always knew I wanted to do it. But once I realized I wasn't going to play, I wanted to figure out something else to be around the game. So the gift of gab did me well in that regard. And luckily, I found a place in St. Cloud that, timing was perfect. They needed somebody to do games, and I was able to get 4 great years of experience to build an awesome demo tape and ultimately get in the industry.
Some people are just meant for their jobs, and I always think it's so fascinating whenever you see that progression from I have an interest in it, so let me just play around with it, to now you are a true professional in that. It's just pretty cool.
It's unique. It really is. And sometimes I pinch myself thinking, I'm going to the game, calling a game for a living. And, it's such a dream as a kid. So much else with my job that I do in my role as manager of media relations and broadcasting. But the best part, certainly, I love, everything that I do. But the best part certainly is pulling on that headset and those 3 hours that the game lasts and getting to provide those calls. So to be able to do that and dream it and achieve it and, do some games at the NHL level and then be in a market like Hershey, I consider myself pretty lucky every day when I go to the rink as a job.
So following, a Calder Cup winning season, and of course there's the inevitable roster turnovers between graduates. We saw Lucas Johansson graduate up to the NHL, and then those who have moved to other teams. We saw a goalie go overseas. There have been other skaters that have gone overseas as well. How is the vibe around the team with that turnover and the new faces coming in? And have you noticed anything different about the team since last season?
Yeah, it's definitely a different group, right? But in a good way. We did lose a lot of pieces, like you mentioned. We have the core back. Our captains are all back. Hunter Shepard, our Calder Cup MVP, is back. So that's a real good place to build. But a lot of players that played huge roles departed. A lot of them to make the National Hockey League, which is awesome. A few of them to explore opportunities overseas. And everybody's playing really well that left the team elsewhere. And we've been following from afar. But they reloaded. The Washington Capitals did an awesome job with Brian Helmer of the Hershey Bears reloading and bringing in some players that on paper maybe even make us arguably a more potent team than we were last year. And that's hard to argue with a Calder Cup championship team and saying this year's team is more potent, but there is more offensive firepower on paper and we've seen glimpses of it. So one thing that I thought was pretty indicative of the culture that we have here that Todd Nelson preaches is I was talking to Chase Prisky, who's off to a good start with us this year. Originally drafted by the Caps, didn't sign for a better opportunity. The Caps were loaded with D at the time, winds up full circle back in the Caps organization. And he just the other day, we were at a Hershey Cubs junior game making an appearance, and he couldn't speak enough about the culture in the locker room and how there's no click and how the guys that won a championship, he was worried, and as were the new guys worried coming in, there would be the championship team here and then the new guys there. And they've really ingrained and integrated all as one. And Todd Nelson and I were talking today, and he thinks that on a chemistry side, this year's team is ahead of where this last year's team was at this time of building that chemistry together. So all those are really good signs. You have to be pulling on the same rope to win a Calder Cup. You need a lot of breaks to go your way. We certainly got a lot last year. We earned a lot of those, but on the flip side, it really seems to be an awesome start to that chemistry, that rebuilding the team. And some of these guys have come in and are already putting up big points and fit in seamlessly on the score sheet, and it's going that way in the locker room behind the scenes too.
So the Bears are off to a pretty good start so far this season. If the memory serves me, it's the best since the 2008-2009 season, which is a really great one to compare to, considering that was also a Calder Cup championship. But it's not been without its challenges. There's been a few different ups and downs for the team here so far. Kind of piggybacking off that last question, how do you see this team differently from last season? Obviously, the chemistry is there, but there's already been kind of a resilience factor we've seen.
Yeah, I think this year's team is finding out pretty quickly what it takes to be a champion, what it takes to win, and what Todd Nelson expects. They're 8-3 at the time of this recording, and maybe not playing up to their potential yet. And that's a scary thought, because they're going to be good and they're going to be even better than they were. But the coaching staff, Todd Nelson's quote, you heard it, Corey. I saw you wrote about it in one of your articles. Was the analytics were so bad I wanted to puke after a 2-1 loss where they lost with this half of a second left in Wilkes-Barre. It was a couple games in a row that he was so frustrated with the way the team played in the process in a game they won in overtime at home, and a game that they lost and missed out on getting at least a point by half a second. So that's the standard of excellence here. These guys are learning that. Now, how they differ, there's more firepower for this team. We don't necessarily have to win games from Hunter Shepard standing on his head, winning games 2-1. We do have the ability to score a few more goals. There's some things we need to do and tighten up defensively, but Pierre Dubé can put the puck in the net. Alex Limoges was a 54-point scorer last year in Manitoba, and no disrespect to Garrett Pilon or Mason Morelli or Sam Annis or any of the guys that he replaced, but they weren't putting up those numbers in their time in Hershey. So we're seeing some of the players that have come in be key offensive contributors and a little bit more firepower. Now that depth's going to be tested early, like you mentioned. The Capitals are an older team. They've had some injuries. They've had some guys move on. The Bears center depth went from stacked and not able to get everybody in the lineup with some call-ups in the last bit, now suddenly to a bit depleted. So that's going to be a test. We saw the depth, the hallmark of the team's success last year, but I do think there's a little more firepower, and there's also a learning curve for some of these new guys about what's expected here in Hershey. We see them getting by maybe on their talent and their abilities, and they're going to integrate right in the system and really learn what it takes to be ready for that playoff-tested battle that Todd Nelson expects from his team.
So you've already mentioned quite a few names, and this team has seen quite a few opponents, some that they haven't seen in a while. But have there been any surprises for you personally so far, either on this Bears roster or in their competition that they faced?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we start with the Bears, obviously, because that's my bread and butter, I really think that from this side of the roster, I've been super impressed with a handful of guys that brought to the table that maybe didn't quite expect. But one that we had last year briefly, and now we're seeing him bring it a little bit more, is Bogdan Cherniev, who's a forward out of Russia, fourth-round draft pick. He played a couple games last season, but he's trying to make sure to solidify a spot in the lineup right now. There's so many bodies. They're trying to get everybody in, and sometimes he's not going to play every day, but we've started to see flashes of what's going to make him a National Hockey League player. He's big. He moves well. He can put the puck in the net. He can kill penalties. He can play the power play. So he's been kind of the biggest surprise for me, that we didn't quite know what we had, that you're seeing, all right, this guy could play games in the National Hockey League. We see why he was drafted, where he was drafted, why they're so high on him. And, let's see where he is in a year, or even by year end, or even in 2 months from now. So that's been definitely a big surprise and a positive direction for me. I will say Wilkes-Barre is a much improved club. They haven't been nearly as good as they were in my first couple of years in the league. These last few, I expect them to be playoff contenders again. They do have too many veterans. They solved one of the problems earlier this week with Andreas Janssen being his contract getting mutually terminated. But too many veterans for them certainly, I'm sure, isn't easy to deal with for JD Forrest. But they certainly look like a much improved club. And meanwhile, on the flip side, the Bears being able to win a couple games in Providence. I don't want to say it's the turning of the tides. The Providence Bruins are still and always a tough competitor, but it's nice to see the Bears kind of break that jinx where they hadn't been able to win, if at all, ever in Providence in my tenure here with the organization over these last 8 years. So there's been a few of the things. Going into Providence and getting 4 points is huge. Wilkes-Barre going to be a real tough test for the remaining games in the season series. Still 9 of them left, a lot to go. And then, Bogdan's really been a young guy that stood out, that maybe we didn't know quite what we had there, that's starting to come and be a well-rounded player when it's all said and done.
I'm so sorry. I know it is my question next. I am dropping the ball all over the place here. Obviously, I think we all know the sweeter by the dozen call that went across the internet after the Hershey Bears won this summer. Do you have like a favorite moment or a goal call or anything that just you think about all of the time? Because I feel like there's a lot of calls out there that you just instantly get transported to that moment. So do you have a favorite goal call that you've done, or is sweeter by the dozen just unbeatable?
Well, I think that play is probably unbeatable, but I'll say what rivals it is. Garrett Pilon winning the game in Game 5, not necessarily for the call, but Game 5 of the finals. How loud the Giant Center was, how electric that building was, what that game meant for our chances of winning the cup, and what it meant to our fan base, I think will resonate with Bears fans for a long, long time. And I've come in here and heard about, Eric Fair in 2006 and what that meant to the Bears fan base, and winning back-to-back in 2009 and 10, and some of those really memorable moments. But we now have a new one for the young fans that didn't experience those, and for the fans that did as kids, maybe they're now a little bit older, not looking at you, Corey, but they have a moment now and that they can share with their family and new family members. So that game was so monumental, and honestly, it's not necessarily even my call on it. I love what was said between Todd Sadowski from Fox 43 and myself after, some of the things like the California dream and of a Calder Cup, and they hope Monday is a date with destiny in Palm Desert. And I told John Walton, who's a wonderful human, great person, great broadcaster, who was there for the whole run, the former voice of the Bears, now the voice of the Capitals. I said, hey, we're not going to win the cup at home. We know that. But if at some point tonight in game 5, with as loud as it's going to be, I can use your line that you used when they won in 2010. Can I use it? Can I kind of pay homage to that call of, the decibel level so loud it seems as if the roof may come off, or I don't think I got it exactly right, but close enough. And I got to use that too. So that was pretty cool. That one sticks out. Personally, another one that will always stick out that's non-Bears related is, getting to call some Alex Ovechkin goals in the National Hockey League, getting to call an overtime winner, Alex Ovechkin scoring one in DC during the pandemic against Boston, and then Dmitry Orlov scoring an overtime winner in Pittsburgh to beat the Penguins. Like, I grew up Crosby Ovechkin, that rivalry, to get to call a Crosby Ovechkin game, and the Capitals won in Pittsburgh and silence that building was awesome. So that's a few on the higher level with the Bears. They really all come from this run. Had a few special ones, Brian Pino winning playoff series in overtime was really special as well in 2019, but nothing that really rivals this run. So the sweeter by the dozen thing is something I knew I always wanted to say. I didn't know how it was going to come out, and I was a little excited, and my voice was all over the place in the first part because I was just so elated, but I'm glad it came together. I'm glad it resonated with our fan base and people. And, ultimately those are all ones that I just feel really fortunate that I was able to do and be able to be a part of.
Pretty cool to have it on the wall of the rink in Hershey as well, I imagine.
Yeah, that was unexpected. I didn't know they were doing that. I knew they were making some changes to the building, which was really exciting to kind of brand it for the championship caliber hockey club that we want our fans to know that we are. And when that went up, it was like, wow, that's pretty neat. So to see it on that, to see some of the stuff I said on a T-shirt, like all those are pinch you type of moments. You don't want to get a big head or a big ego by any means. I talk for a living. I'm lucky to get to do that, but to have that there, and by no means was it necessarily world's most original thing, but I think it fit and I think it resonated. That certainly, I walk by to go to my office every day, and I don't think it'll get old, and I don't think I'll ever take for granted that, I got to be part of something like that, because the way we won was so emotionally exhausting and thrilling all at once. It's got to be one of the best, if not the best, Calder Cup finals ever in this league's history.
Now, Zach, talking about broadcasting a little bit here, do you have any sort of superstitions that kind of you do before games? And if so, what's the weirdest one?
I prepare pretty similar for what I do with, my kind of stat sheet and board that I come up with. And there's a certain part of it I like to do a little bit later in the day, closer to the broadcast. You always want to prepare ahead. You don't want to be scrambled on the day of the game. But I find like writing those notes in the same time, the same pattern, the same rhythm, get my mind ready to go. I'm a little superstitious at times, that sometimes you think, hey, we're undefeated with this tie, so I'm going to wear this tie again. I will say, Game 5, we won. I wore a shirt that I had worn a couple times in the playoffs and a tie, and I was going to wear it for Game 6 in Coachella Valley, and I thought, I wore that in Game 5. We're on TV. Someone might be like, didn't he just wear that? Forget that. I have no impact on the game. Then we lost Game 6. So what I was in Game 7, back to what we were in Game 5, the same shirt and tie combo. So a few superstitions in there for sure. I definitely like to kind of be a creature of habit and go about things the same type of way, but we try to mix up the mojo. I'll say Mitch Lammer, my partner on the radio, is very superstitious. He will change my color pen today. I wore a different shirt. I moved my papers in a different order if the Bears are on a losing streak. He will do anything to try to switch up the mojo. So he's a former player, so we got a fair bit of that in the broadcast booth sometimes with him up there.
I'm sure the guys in the room appreciated your dedication in Game 7 to wearing that shirt and tie again.
Whatever it takes, right? And the biggest thing I'll say is, like, it's been kind of documented that Game 6, the team was really tight and everyone was uptight because they just wanted to win so bad. And Game 7, everyone was loose. It was true for us. I did sway from my routine from Game 7 because on a road game, it's very different from home. They're not even comparable. But I wanted to cherish that moment, that this was the last chance this team was together, and we were all so relaxed. So I got to the rink. I normally go on the second bus over. I don't need to get there as early as the coaches do. I normally go on the second bus over. I went on the first, and I just sat there with our equipment managers in the hallway, and we were rocking the music, and some of it was like inspirational Rocky-themed music. And I don't know, I just didn't seeing the guys come in and fist bumping them and wishing them luck and realizing that this was the last time that team would all be together, I was at peace with whatever happened. And that's one time that, maybe a little risky swaying from it, but I think it made everybody so loose that the moment wasn't bigger than us. And, I didn't have any part of the puck going in the net by Mike Vecchione and making it happen, but to see the attitude of the team and how loose everybody was and how much they wanted to win together made me pretty confident that we could do it, even when we're down 2-0. So it was cool to see it come to fruition.
Now, going off of broadcasting, what is your favorite name that you've ever broadcasted? Whether it's just who the person is or just a fun name.
Oh, that's a good one. There's a goaltender by the name of Alex Sakarolopoulos or something along those lines. He's made the rounds because he's been called up to the American League as a third stringer goalie from the ECHL, and he was in the ECHL for a little bit. But his last name, I think in Chicago, the United States Hockey League, was so long that they actually just shortened it, took a few letters off, and kind of took out some of the letters in the middle and said good enough. So that was one that was always a tongue twister for sure. That was tough, and I don't think I ever got it 110% right. And his equipment managers could never get it right, and it was always kind of like, haha, look at this guy with his long last name. We just had the referee Bobby Joe Love the other day for the first time. That's the first time we had him at a game, and I think that's an absolutely awesome name for anyone in hockey, official as well. So that one certainly would be up there as well. I remember a hockey player on one of the women's hockey teams that we went against. Her last name was Thunder. I think her name was Paige Thunder, and she was a goalie. And there were all sorts of fun analogies about, Thunder and Lightning, how she was shutting opponents down and stuff like that. So really cool name there on that one. But I would say Alex Sakarolopoulos, I still can't even get it right all these years later, was one of the more fun / tough names because of how many letters were in it.
Zach, I have to gush just a little bit here because you mentioned Garrett Pilon's goal, and I had to bring this up because I got to skate on the Giant Center ice over the weekend with a group of guys, and that was one of the things we were shooting around and warming up, and I had to take the puck and circle it around to the point and fling it at the net, and in my head I was hearing Garrett Pilon, the Bears win, and it was one of those things I was like, yeah, it means a lot. I was getting goosebumps with everything you were saying. But
yeah, that was a special one. That was a special one for sure. That moment, the 10 to 15 minutes after, Corey, will stick out in my mind forever of how loud and how rabid that building was. And for fans that haven't been to Hershey, and no disrespect to any other market in the American Hockey League, but you have to get here and check it out. It is, for a big game like that, it is crazy. And we have some unbelievable markets. I look at when Cleveland beat Hershey in the Calder Cup Finals, have 20,000 people there losing their minds. Like, there's some special markets in our league, and Hershey's right near the top for sure.
Absolutely. And, to kind of cap this all off, it was a whirlwind summer for you, not only just because it was, shortened by a number of months here, but one of the highlights was obviously the birth of your daughter, Easton Rose Fisch, who you got to have, just some perfect timing to have her with the Calder Cup. How special was that to get to share that moment with your family, plus the addition of the new one?
It was really cool. Like, kudos to Hershey Entertainment Resorts and the Bears for bringing our families out with us. That's not cheap, and it was first class to bring them out with us for Game 6 and 7 in Coachella. And there's a lot of people that counted the team out that trip would never happen. And sure enough, there we are. And to experience that with our families was amazing. I take a lot of guff from our coaches and from our players and from my wife too. If you watch the video of me raising the cup, which I'm so fortunate to be able to do that on the ice, and never even my wildest dreams imagined that'd be possible. I come out on the ice and timing was perfect where it was like my turn. They were looking for me to pass it to, and I just had finished my broadcast, and my son, he's 4, it would have been 3 at the time, beelines to me, and out of nowhere comes running across the ice towards me, and I see him and I pick him up and I give him a kiss and I chuck him down and go right to the Calder Cup. And everyone's like, oh, mad was your wife of you for that? Like, look at you just ignoring your kid. But I obviously had my eyes on the prize. So I took a lot of hard time for that. But to have my family, my wife there with all the sacrifices she makes when I'm on the road was amazing. She's obviously the rock that keeps our family together. So to get to experience that with her and all the other wives and girlfriends and spouses and families and see the tears in their eyes, that's what really made it cool. And then from that perspective, to be a family of 4 now and have my little girl, pretty awesome summer. Luckily, it was a happy, healthy birth, and I had my day with the Cup in September. So she was just a couple weeks old to be able to put her in the Calder Cup and experience that with her. And my folks came out from Iowa, and my wife's folks came out from Iowa, and my brother and sister were all here. And it was kind of a family reunion and to meet the new family member and celebrate the Cup. So we had a party at a place with a nice pool and some drinks and food, and took it around to a few people that meant a lot to me. To have them all there was awesome. So little girl's doing well now. Hopefully she'll be into hockey. My 4-year-old's starting to get into hockey a little bit and starting to know the teams and knows the Bears chant. So it's fun to be a family affair, but definitely makes it difficult to go on the road more so than it was before, but even more fun to come home after a long road trip.
That's awesome. And it's great to even have that, how could she not be into hockey? You'll be able to, show her this picture of her in the Calder Cup when she's weeks old.
She doesn't have a choice. She's going to be around it regardless, as long as this game blesses me with being in it. So, between her and my son, they're going to have to at least tolerate it. So, luckily, I think, we'll get my little boy on skates again. It's been a while coming up here in the next year or so, and see if he can hack it out there. I hope he got more athletic ability than I did.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I look forward to it. But Zack, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate having you on here, and best of luck to you this year with calling the Bears, and selfishly, I'm hoping it's another long run here in the spring.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me. This is always fun. You guys do a great job, and looking forward to a nice long run, and hopefully we can do this again a little bit later in the season.
All right, and a big thank you to Zack for joining us here on the show. Always great to get a different perspective. Guys, we have a lot of players that, join our show, but it's always incredibly different when you get to have an announcer on there, because there's a whole different perspective. And that's what's so fantastic about having those guys on.
And it's not only that, but it's like a whole different vibe when you get the play-by-play guys on. They're a little bit more open, I think, than some of the players are. Well, of course, they're much more comfortable talking, where some of the players might be a little bit more shy. With the play-by-play guys, you're going to get just the personality, you're going to get the stories, and Zack tells them like nobody else.
Yeah, he's awesome. So we'll move on to Zander's segment, which I believe is going to be talking about the Springfield Thunderbirds.
I gotta talk about my team. I mean, you talk about the Bears, Hershey. Let me start over. Jeez, I can't talk tonight. I mean, I gotta talk about my team. Corey, you talk about the Bears. I gotta talk about the Thunderbirds. They are one team. I don't know if this record is completely accurate. I didn't look through all of the transaction records for every team this year, but I know that the Thunderbirds have not had a single call-up this season to the Blues. I don't know if that's a product of the Blues having too much depth, or if that's just they've wanted to keep their core together and they've kind of stuck it to the Blues, but the fact that their team is mostly who they had on day one, with a few Carolina players coming down, it just blows my mind. You don't see that very often these days in the AHL.
This is unbelievable. I don't like, I'm going to, just for receipts, I'm bringing up, if you're on YouTube, look at your screen right now. The transactions. Okay, you have the whole slew of everyone getting added at the start of the season, and we have four moves since then. A loan to Orlando in the ECHL. Okay, sorry, we had one. Dylan Coughlin got recalled by Carolina. So that doesn't technically count. Then, he was loaned back, and then Will Cranley got sent down to the ECHL. This is unbelievable, but good for them. I mean, what a way to solidify some chemistry there.
Well, I mean, so on the Dylan Coughlin note, sure, he got called up by Carolina, but he didn't play. No one's been called up to the NHL and actually played and made an impact with the team to say, maybe you should stay up with us.
I'm just looking at this and I am just blown away. I would love to know what this is like. as someone who is also a fan of teams in the leagues, I would love to know what this feeling is like, knowing that your roster is this stable.
Maybe that'll be my next story.
The other question you have to ask is, did we just jinx it by mentioning it? Because, I mean, that kind of happened early on with a couple of the things we talked about before. I mean, I think it was like the first or second week that we had the podcast that
Yep.
we mentioned a couple of things, and like immediately, like there was one like the next day or maybe even the same day where it all got busted. So if the Blues get a bunch of injuries and they have to call up a bunch of players, and by the way, they should call up Nathan Walker if they get a chance, but I'm a little bit biased.
Yeah.
But
No, I agree.
Just a little.
yeah, exactly. But if that starts to happen, I think that if the Thunderbirds catch wind of this, they're going to be coming for you, Zander.
Then it's my funeral, I guess.
So just for just to illustrate this is the team I cover, Cleveland. Yeah, it almost takes up the entire screen, the amount of moves they've made so far to start. Yeah. I just want to, okay, just for the heck of it, somebody name a team. I want to look just randomly.
Texas Stars.
Texas Stars. Okay, cool.
Because
We're
I know
gonna-
Dallas has had a good season, so let's just put it out there for fun.
Theirs isn't bad. Theirs actually looks very similar to what Springfield does. You have an ECHL loan, recall from that. You have Chase Wheatcroft loaned from Dallas, and the rest are ECHLs. So that looks very similar. Let's look at Tucson.
Oh, geez.
This looks more like what I'm used to in the American Hockey League. Tucson Roadrunners did not let me down. This looks like a lot of paper moves to me, though.
Yes, it does.
But this is what I'm used to. Still, Springfield, I'm jealous.
I mean,
Here,
well,
agree.
Dallas did have some people. There was a loan from Dallas, and then they probably got added back to Dallas. They may be the other team that doesn't have anybody called up. I don't know. We met our match.
Yeah, now I'm just sitting here just randomly going through. It's like, oh, if you one that really got hit, the Ontario Reign this season already has 3 pages of transactions.
Yeesh.
Yikes! And the
I'm
season
not
started
complaining
a month
anymore.
ago.
I
Just
know,
about to
I'm not
complain.
either.
And the season
This
started a
is-
month ago. Holy crap!
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's again, some of these look like just paper moves. Because you have Alex Laferriere going up and down a lot, Jared Anderson Dolan going up and down a lot. So I don't know how many of these are just truly paper moves or cap shenanigans or whatever. But still 3 pages.
2
I'm
pages, and we're a month and 3 days into the season.
have fun, everyone.
It's a little impressive. One other thing to note with St. Louis Springfield is that St. Louis kind of struggled to start the season, right, Zander? Like, I mean, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows to start off. I mean, they've been hot recently. I think if I remember what I saw on Twitter correctly, is that they their last win was 8-2, and there's not really too much you want to tweak after an 8-2 win type of thing. But there's some doubt there for a little bit where they might look at a guy like Adam Gaudette and say, this guy's scoring goals, let's get him up here type of thing.
Yeah, I thought they were definitely going to say, all right, let's get him up here and maybe scratch a few guys for a few games, but it just hasn't turned out that way. I mean, maybe the fact that they've played more games and they're a little more tired maybe made them question it, but I don't know.
So right now, Springfield is actually 3rd in the Atlantic. I'm happy to say that all the teams represented here by writers in the Calder's Calling podcast, Hershey, Hartford, and Springfield are the top 3 in the Atlantic. But they are currently 7-6-1-0, good for 15 points, a 5.36 save percentage. In terms of goal differential, 43-4, 40 against. They are 6-3-1-0 in their past 10, so definitely a wild turnaround there.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It got over those early struggles in a big way, which you love to see from a team that has so much firepower like Springfield does, where they have that top line's been fantastic, and it seems like more guys are kind of carrying the mail there a little bit too, which is always the great challenge at the AHL level is you'll usually have that kind of that big line, and then you'll need some supporting cast, and it's always kind of a question is like, when will the supporting cast kind of come through? And for Springfield, which has had a very successful but short partnership with St. Louis, it's been paying off in spades the last few seasons.
Well, what they've really struggled with in the past that I've found as well is their goaltending sticking consistent. Because, of course, they had Joel Hofer last year in the last few years, and he was bouncing up and down between St. Louis and Springfield. And you never knew, okay, is he going to start tomorrow? Or is he going to be up in St. Louis tomorrow? This year they have Malcolm Subban and they have Adam Sharenko, who conceivably are probably going to be there, barring any horrible injury to anybody up in St. Louis. And even then, I could see St. Louis trading for a goalie before they even go to the AHL.
That's a fair point too. Well, that is going to do it for this week's edition of the Calder's Calling podcast. As we mentioned before, you can find us anywhere that you find podcasts, especially on YouTube, is where you get to see all of the lovely video of our lovely faces. So until next week, we will see you next time. Have a great week.